Today, Heather Volchko is joined by Marla Watts Pacheco to discuss high leverage practice number 11, how to identify and prioritize long and short term learning goals.
Welcome to A Little TLC, the podcast where we explore the dynamic world of education. Join our host, Heather Volchko, as this season we focus on high leverage practices, known as HLPs. Each episode will examine a different HLP, an essential strategy designed to enhance teaching and improve outcomes across various educational settings. These practices focus on collaboration, assessment, social emotional behavioral support, and instruction, benefiting all K-12 students. I hope you're ready to be both challenged and inspired because this season is all about mastering the HLPs. This is A Little TLC.
Identify and prioritize long and short term learning goals. Teachers prioritize what is most important for students to learn by providing meaningful access to and success in the general education and other contextually relevant curricula. Teachers use grade level standards, assessment data, and learning progressions, students' prior knowledge, and IEP goals and benchmarks to make decisions about what is most crucial to emphasize, and develop long and short term goals accordingly. They understand essential curriculum components, identify essential prerequisites and foundations, and assess student performance in relation to these components.
For this HLP, we are talking about identifying and prioritizing long and short-term learning goals. This is really our focus on how we're picking what we're working on, and it's not just for the right now need, it's also for the long-term future need as well. This week, I've got Marla with me, who does this in all kinds of different ways, in all kinds of different settings, so I'm super excited to see where she takes this. So Marla, for you, when you hear identify and prioritize long and short-term learning goals, what is that?
Well, just want to say thank you so much for having me here today. I should probably start with that, but that really just depends, I think, like on who you're working with, the student, the teacher, the staff, and all of that. But picking those long-term and short-term goals really depends on what is the need in that moment. So sometimes in my practice or in my experience, some things can just be like, I need a fix right now. This is a goal that we need to fix. Perhaps it might look more like a short-term goal. And then once we kind of get those short-term goals established, then we can, okay, what's the end goal now?
Mhm.
So I think it really just depends, but I've had both experiences where working with teachers and staff where it can be like, okay, this is where we want to be in a year
Mhm.
versus like, this is where I kind of want to tackle just this week. But I think that really takes collaboration and, with those high leverage practices, right, comes like the assessment part as well.
Yeah.
But just kind of focusing on those like long and short term goals, it really kind of depends on what is the need at that time.
Yeah. So when we're looking at long-term goals, short-term goals, a lot of times we see our short-term goals are also kind of building up toward those long-term goals as well. So it might be the right now need, but we're actually
Correct.
meeting those right now needs in a way that's going to set us up to be able to see those long-term goals come through in the future. So what is this not? I feel like there's a lot of things that can fit into here. So what would not count as prioritizing or identifying what those short-term and long-term goals might be?
Well, I think kind of what you were saying earlier too, and as you were mentioning this, and I was talking about this earlier too, like sometimes those short-term goals, they end up building up to that long-term goal, right?
Mhm.
So so I perhaps, and maybe you can speak more on your experience too, Heather, but like I think there is not something that would not be a focus, I think, at that time, because I think it all matters. But I think what it's important is that if we ever do find a time or yeah, where we're feeling kind of conflicted, right? Of like, okay, what should be the priority right now? I think that's where we kind of have to work as a team and ask those questions like, okay, like I know there's so many things we want to tackle right now, but what could be the number one thing that you would want us to take care for you or yeah, help you with during this time? And by what time would you like this to be accomplished? So I think I don't know, that kind of helps like answer your question, but I think, yeah, I never thought about it that way of like what would not be like the priority or like the main thing not to focus at that time.
I mean, the big thing that comes to mind for me is just like flying by the seat of our pants, right? Like something that just frustrates us or is like, oh, this is just such a pain. I wish this was different. And so all of a sudden we're working on that where it's like,
Mm,
well, does it need to be worked on? And is this actually getting us anywhere that we want to go? Or is it just
okay.
like a
Yeah.
momentary band-aid? But I think
Okay.
that's that planfulness, right? Like if we don't have that long-term focus, our short-term goals are just I kind of call them like whack-a-mole goals. They're not actually goals. I'm just playing whack-a-mole right now and I don't really know where I'm going and I don't know when it ends. And it's not necessarily like prioritized. It's just whatever's right here, right in front of me at this moment. And that's the problem. And that's what we're going to fix. So I love how you're talking about it, going, well, then let's take all those issues and actually line it out and go, what are our big needs? What can we really make some progress on? And
Yes.
let's just go with that.
Yeah.
But that's that planfulness. It's pushing into actually like the goals and like prioritization and really leaning into how does this all string together in a meaningful way beyond just the right now.
Yes. Especially in the school settings, a lot of the times you'll work with teams that are kind of like on just survival mode,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
They're just, I just need to get by till the end of this week because summer breaks are around the corner. So whatever you can do or whatever you can give me for the next few days, I will take it.
Yep.
And going back to what you're saying, sometimes it's like that whack-a-mole, right? We're like, okay, well, I'm just going to put a band-aid over this. And then whenever it comes off, it comes off. We'll tackle it again. But I think, okay, I hear your needs, multiple needs, and I
Hmm.
hear everything that's going on, but how can we break this down, right? And like what can we be like, okay, what's priority 1? What's priority 2? Because at the same time, if you want to try to conquer everything, that's kind of impossible, especially in a school setting, right? Like time goes by so fast. But I think just kind of like gathering everyone's thoughts and their input and then just kind of like tweezing out like, okay, what is it that we can accomplish right now and what's something that we can maybe accomplish later on. And I think sometimes having those conversations do really help of like, oh, okay, this is truly the need that this
Mm.
person needs is not so much this is the issue. So I think you get like the underlying root of what that person may need at that time.
I mean, you're kind of talking around it right now already. So my next question was going to be why? Like, why do we even do this? Because right
Mhm.
now I have a right now need, and I need to play whack a mole, and it needs to get fixed, right? So
Yep.
why do we actually take the time to identify and prioritize what those goals might be, and to align those short term goals into those long term goals? Like, what's the big why behind why we approach our practice this way?
Well, I think for me, and hopefully I can speak for everyone on this, but I think it's to really help the student, right?
Mm.
I think sometimes we have to take it back like, why are we here? We are here to help the student be successful, which is why we have these high leverage practices, right? Including one of them is like identifying those long term, short term goals and trying to help have the student become or be successful in the environment that they're in. And then when you do that, then you start helping or identifying ways of how you can help others, right, in that team to help that student get there. So I think it really is because you want to have the student feel successful. You also want to have your team be successful, which is why it's
Mhm.
important that you identify these goals and to really just help everyone, right? Like you
Yeah,
as someone that wants to help a student, you want to feel successful because you now see the fruit of your work that you're putting in.
exactly.
But that's why I think it's important to have those goals, and sometimes I know you might be back at the table again, like, "Okay, here we are talking about the same goals," but I think that's where you need to have those healthy conversations and like, "Okay, do we need to revamp what we are currently working on?" I think that's the reason why, because you wanna make sure that the student is getting the success and that they're learning and they're getting the best education.
Yeah, as an educator, something that was always super helpful to me was that if I'm actually lined up in those long term goals, I can feel like I'm playing whack a mole on short term goals. But then when they actually start racking up, even when I'm working my tail off and don't necessarily see the moment to moment progress, when you
Mhm.
actually step back and compare it against that long term goal, we're actually closer. And it
Yeah.
also meant that those moments where I was just, like, spinning my wheels and playing those, whack-a-mole and all of that, it's a lot of work. It's a lot
Yes.
of work, and I can't really necessarily see any actual payout from it, and so I just felt like I was spinning my wheels a lot, and
Mhm.
that's exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about, how do we line it up in such a way that not just the student is being successful, but the folks around the student can also notice and see that progress, because if we can see that progress, we can point that out to the students, and then they can actually continue, right? We're actually perpetuating their learning, especially, like, with the high incidence folks that I work with. letting them know, hey, actually, did you notice? Like, you didn't used to do this and now you're doing it. Like, that's
Mhm.
amazing. Thank you so much. Right. We can see that because we're actually looking for it and it's all lined up in that direction that we're trying to head. So
Yeah.
I know I'm throwing a couple examples here, but for you, like, what does this look like? It's shown up for you in a ton of different ways and all the different roles and hats and settings that you have worked in. So what are some of those examples of actually like how do I pick a long-term goal or how do I prioritize what short-term goals I'm going to work on now as opposed to trying to tackle everything all at the same time?
So, as you mentioned, I've worked in different settings. I value each experience so close to my heart because I've learned so much from each of them. But because you do work in different settings, you do kind of exhibit a different way of how you're going to tackle or
Hmm.
pick. So, for example, for an in home perspective, sometimes it's just like talking to the parent, okay, what is it that we can fix? Or what is it that we can tackle? If there's one thing that you can focus on, I know there's a ton on your plate. What's something
Hmm.
that we can do for you? Right. So kind of like getting their input as well. For a clinical standpoint, that's a little bit more different because it's more of a controlled environment. You kind of like, okay, there's kind of more that you can kind of tackle and take
Hmm.
on. Of course, you want to make sure that you get the consent of the parent, but I think there is a little bit more. I think, and from my experience, I think there's because it is more of a controlled setting, you do have a little bit more freedom of what you can do. And I know that kind of sounds weird because I say controlled environment, but yeah, freedom. But I think for my BCBA folks out there, you're going to be like, yes, I understand what she means, I hope. Now, for school, it's kind of the same thing for in home. I think about that, like working with teachers and staff. And like, okay, I know there's a ton that you got to do between like this time and this is your end time. And I know you're checked out by this time.
Hmm.
But what is it that I can do for you, or what we can do for you for this one specific student that you have? My experience, I think, is like I cannot do my job alone. Although I may have great ideas, and sometimes I would like to just take ownership of the situation just to alleviate some issues from my parents, for the staff, and for everyone else. However, because we were just talking about how like we do these things because we want to see the student successful, I also want to see my team be successful.
Hmm.
And it's not going to be helpful if I'm just like just kind of taking everything out of their hands, right? It's kind of, it's negative reinforcement for me. I also want to make sure that the team understands and that they also feel fulfilled and not defeated, which is why it's important to just also collaborate with them and talk to them and like let's identify what's important, what's not so important. I know everything is important, but like we're humans at the end of the day. We don't have special wants to make everything work, but we can get it done. It just might take a little longer for us to get there. So yeah, I think that's kind of like it's unique, I think, in every type of setting.
Yeah.
But I think the common theme is that, you are collaborating with your team and making sure that everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, I love that you're driving home that collaboration piece and it looks different in each of those settings. I mean, you're talking about even in a clinic, you've got other colleagues that you're collaborating with, but
Mhm.
sometimes you've also got like insurance companies that are also sort of driving what you can and can't do, right?
That's true.
There's all these different players that are either literally or figuratively at the table that are kind of driving what should or shouldn't be done. And I think as a practitioner, then we get pinched in the middle of all of them to try to do what's right for the kid, but also, like you're saying, what's right for our teams. There's been a lot of times that I do school consults, and sure, it might be great for the kid, but it is not something that that team can effectively accomplish. And so, like, how else can we kind of creatively move in that direction? It might not be if I could just jump in and go for it. Here's how I would do it, and here's what I would do, and just roll that out. Well, if they don't have those skills or they don't have just even some time to do some of these things, right? Just increase their own skills, like what that looks like. Well, now my goals for that team is going to be completely different, even though we might have the same long term goal. The short term goals are going to be completely different than if I could just jump in and do it. But we've also sat at tables with teams that have a very different design for what they would want their long-term goal to be. And so then we're like, man, okay, so how can we maybe align some of our short-term goals that would lead to our desired long-term goal to get you to see some progress so that then maybe you can buy into the long-term goal that we were trying to go for and, maybe not be as steadfast on what you might think could be the long-term goal. But a lot of
Yeah.
times it's just partnering. It's all in those communications.
Yeah. When you mentioned insurance, I was like, "Oh my goodness, I forgot about that." Like, because, I'm no longer practicing,
Yeah.
and doing in-home services, but that was something that I was in for a very long time, and you're right, like, now that I'm thinking about it, like, certain insurances will tell you what's allowed, what's not allowed,
Yep.
what does count as something that you can work on with this specific client, what things you cannot do.
Yep.
So that's another component that you have to consider. But yeah, like, and I think too, like, and I'm thinking of in-home again, it also depends on what's best for that client at that time. If I have an older adult, right, at that point, okay,
Yep.
we kind of just need to teach them to survive at this point, right? Like depending on their functioning level, right? And again, high
Yep.
leverage practices is where you assess, right?
Mhm.
But
The identification part.
yeah, those identification part, right? So like again, so what will be best for this young adult at 18 years old who has these certain skills and have these certain barriers? What is it that we can do right now? So sometimes I've had experiences where parents are like, you know what, we know academics are not going to be a thing for my son or daughter. At this point, I just need my son or daughter to learn how to brush their teeth, how to do certain chores in the home, and that's it. Sometimes I have other conversations where the parents like, "No, we know that he or she is capable of getting a job. We know they're capable of getting their own place one day." And so those conversations will be different as far as identifying what is it that I can help him and her attain a certain goal that would be beneficial for them in the long run. So it again, going back to what we were just talking about earlier, it really just depends on who you're working with, the team that you have, and I'm also thinking, as a BCBA, like ethically, right? Like, how am I doing good to my client, right?
Mhm.
So
Yes.
I feel like I'm not saying this in the best way, but maybe you can summarize what I'm saying. But like, am I doing well by them? Am I
Yeah.
doing like, am I treating them with dignity? The respect and valuing them as I would value any other human being. So does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's are we doing right by our students?
There you go. Boom.
Are we
Did
doing
not
right
take
by
long.
them? And in order to do right by them, we have to do right by their people, which means we are going to have our own short-term and long-term goals for our people so that they can then meet and move along those short-term and long-term goals for their students. But that's like collaboration, right? There's so many different hands in the mix in making the actual work happen. At the end of the day, are we serving our students? And we can't serve our students if we aren't serving our staff.
Right.
So thank you so much for this conversation. I know it's kind of like a wild thing. It seems
It is.
so cut and dry. Identify what their needs are and prioritize how you're going to meet them. But it is
Mhm.
such a more complex conversation,
It
and there's
is.
so many nuances in it. A few minutes isn't going to scratch the surface on that. So thank you so
Nope.
much for taking it on with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
This week, it's Hangout Week. Immerse yourself in an exclusive interview featuring practitioners just like you who are sharing their valuable experiences. Whether you're seeking motivation, knowledge, or fresh perspectives, our interviews cover a wide spectrum of topics, even some unplanned ones. We have found that pre recorded interviews offer the flexibility you need to listen, pause, and revisit the conversation whenever's good for you. And did we mention that you can earn continuing education units too? We want to invite you to head over to thresholdlearning.org, your one stop destination for all things TLC. Here, you'll find this episode's show notes and blog pairing, our entire catalog of ACE accredited self paced courses, an ever expanding bookshelf of resources, and anything else we've talked about. See you there. Are you a university looking to enhance your behavior analysis program for your students working in school context? Partner with us to offer supervised fieldwork opportunities that are meaningful to your educators. Our experienced school-based BCBAs provide remote supervision with both synchronous sessions and asynchronous resources that allow students to gain the required hours while continuing their roles in education. With month-to-month scheduling and systematic skill progression tracking, your students will stay on track to pass their licensure exams and advance their careers without disrupting their current jobs. Enhance your program and guide your educator students toward successful careers as school-based behavior analysts. Contact us at supervision@thresholdlearning.org to learn more about this exciting partnership opportunity. Supervision with TLC.
Teaching students with disabilities is a dynamic and thoughtful process that demands a blend of content expertise, pedagogical strategies, and keen insight into individual student needs. Effective special education teachers navigate this process by using their deep understanding of general and contextual relevant curricula, coupled with evidence-based practices and individualized education programs, or IEP goals. This approach helps them set meaningful long and short-term learning objectives, ensuring that instruction is both targeted and effective. At the heart of this approach is well-designed instruction. Teachers create learning experiences that maximize academic engagement and actively involve students in meaningful activities. This involves not only following standards and learning progressions, but also making informed decisions about the intensity and focus of instruction. By integrating evidence-based practices with their professional judgment, teachers craft lessons that are both proactive and positive, aimed at fostering robust academic growth. Special education teachers also consider a range of factors when setting learning goals. They align their goals with the IEP requirements and broader educational policies, such as those outlined in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, and the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA. These laws ensure that students with disabilities are included in the general education curriculum and held to the same standards as their peers, with appropriate accommodations as needed. Additionally, the implementation of standards like the Common Core State Standards, or CCSS, further guides instructional practices. These standards are adapted to meet the needs of students with disabilities, and districts often provide pacing guides to structure the curriculum effectively. Despite the focus on grade-level standards, there is also significant emphasis on foundational skills, which are crucial for students' overall success. In essence, the role of special education teachers is to blend these various elements, curriculum standards, legal requirements, and individualized needs, to design instruction that not only addresses students' specific challenges, but also ensures they have the opportunity to meet the rigorous academic standards set for all students. When it comes to developing and implementing effective instruction and intervention, educators must start by identifying and prioritizing well-defined long and short-term learning goals. These goals should align with grade-level standards, the needs outlined in each student's IEP, and reflect their current performance levels. Effective educators, when implementing HLP 11, utilize their understanding of essential curriculum components to pinpoint foundational prerequisites and assess student performance to ensure these goals are both ambitious and achievable. By focusing on what's most crucial for students to learn and how they can access and benefit from the general education curriculum, educators intersect with several other high-leverage practices. This includes assessment data to make instructional adjustments, HLP 6, systematically designing instruction towards specific goals, HLP 12, and providing intensive instruction, HLP 20. Additionally, goal setting is most effective when done collaboratively. The team involved can vary from a diverse group, including families for IEP goals, as specified by IDEA, to just the teacher and student for short-term goals. Engaging students in setting and owning their own goals often boosts their motivation and engagement, aligning with HLP 18. Teachers who effectively identify and prioritize long and short-term learning goals begin by linking these goals to the essential knowledge and skills outlined in standards and curricula. They use a combination of formative and summative assessments to track student progress, ensuring the goals are ambitious yet attainable and meaningful for students with disabilities in inclusive classrooms. These teachers thoughtfully consider each student's unique strengths and needs, setting goals that challenge them appropriately while remaining achievable. Collaboration with families is key, as it helps educators understand the instructional priorities valued at home. Teachers are well versed in grade-level standards, focusing on key concepts or big ideas, and teaching these foundational elements first. They consistently connect content back to these big ideas throughout the year for continuity and depth. Moreover, effective teachers break down standards into teachable components, identifying the prerequisite and component skills students need to master. This detailed approach ensures that instruction is targeted and effective, laying a strong foundation for meaningful learning and success. To support teachers effectively, school leaders should focus on several key areas. First, it's crucial to offer instruction, professional development, or coaching that equips educators with the skills to craft high-quality, specific, long, and short-term learning goals. This guidance should help teachers ensure their goals meet relevant benchmarks and align closely with standards and individual education plan (IEP) requirements. School leaders should also evaluate these goals to make sure they are not only ambitious, but also practical and well connected to the necessary benchmarks. Providing constructive feedback is essential. Leaders should review the quality, specificity, and accountability of goals, offering support for any needed revisions. Additionally, it's important to make sure that teachers have robust plans for assessing how well students are meeting their goals. School leaders should offer support with data collection and management to help teachers track progress effectively and adjust their strategies as needed. Prioritized short and long-term learning goals are the driving force behind the effective instruction, yet these goals are influenced by grade-level standards and mandates that ensure students' access to the general education curriculum. Not all standards carry the same weight. Similarly, not every conceptual understanding or skill holds equal importance. For some students, out-of-level instruction may be necessary to address their unique needs. Effective teachers must focus on critical content by aligning students' goals with their current performance levels, strengths, and needs, ensuring that the instruction remains relevant and impactful. That's all for today. We are excited to have Alex Grosso on the show next week to bring his insights on high leverage practice number 12, how to systematically design instruction toward a specific learning goal. See you then.
Hey, before you jump back into your busy life, consider dropping a like and follow Threshold Learning TLC on Facebook and Instagram. And if you like our show, share the podcast with your colleagues. A personal recommendation is by far the best way to promote the podcast. Let them know that they can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else they catch their podcasts. Just be sure to leave a rating and review on your favorite platform. You can also email us at info@thresholdlearning.org. We always enjoy connecting with fellow educators and champions for educational justice. You can find everything you're looking for at thresholdlearning.org. See you there.